Welcome to the first video in my MBTI series. I am starting with my own personality type because I think the most honest place to begin any conversation about personality is with yourself. I am an INFJ. And by the time this video is done, I want you to genuinely understand what that means, not just the surface-level descriptions you find on a quick internet search, but the deeper reality of what it actually feels like to live inside this particular way of experiencing the world. Before I get into the details, let me explain what MBTI is, because not everyone watching this will already know. MBTI stands for Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It is a personality framework developed by Isabel Briggs Myers and her mother Catherine Cook Briggs, who based their work on the theories of Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist who wrote extensively about psychological types in the early 20th century. The MBTI system identifies 16 distinct personality types based on 4 pairs of preferences. Those pairs are introversion or extroversion, which is about where you get your energy; intuition or sensing, which is about how you take in information; feeling or thinking, which is about how you make decisions; and judging or perceiving, which is about how you organize your life and approach the outside world. INFJ stands for introversion, intuition, feeling, and judging. It is consistently described as the rarest of the 16 types, making up roughly 1 to 3% of the general population depending on which study you look at. That rarity is something INFJs often feel in their daily lives, not as a badge of superiority, but as a quiet sense of not quite fitting the mold that most social environments are built around. I want to be clear about something before I go further. MBTI is not a scientific diagnosis. It is a framework for understanding personality tendencies and preferences. Psychologists debate its validity and reliability, and those debates are legitimate and worth knowing about. But many people, myself included, find genuine value in it as a tool for self-understanding and for making sense of patterns in how we think, feel, and relate to others. I use it as a lens, not as a label that defines everything about me. With that said, let me tell you what being an INFJ actually looks like from the inside. The first thing most people learn about INFJs is that they are introverts. But introversion is widely misunderstood, and I want to address that directly. Introversion does not mean shy. It does not mean antisocial. It does not mean you dislike people or struggle to communicate. What it means, in the most accurate sense, is that social interaction is energetically costly for you in a way that it is not for extroverts. Extroverts gain energy from being around people. Introverts use energy in social situations and need solitude to recharge. For me, this shows up in very practical ways. I can be warm in conversation. I can be engaging, funny, and genuinely interested in the person I am talking to. But after sustained social interaction, I need time alone to recover. Not because I did not enjoy the interaction, but because my nervous system processes the experience differently than an extrovert's would. I need quiet. I need space. I need to return to my own internal world and let it settle before I am ready to engage again. Living alone, which I have been doing for several years now, suits me in ways that took me a long time to fully admit. The silence is not loneliness for me most of the time. It is restoration. It is where I actually think, actually process, actually feel things fully rather than managing how I present them to others. The N in INFJ stands for intuition, and this is where things start to get interesting and harder to explain simply. Intuitive types, as opposed to sensing types, tend to pay more attention to patterns, meanings, connections, and possibilities than to immediate concrete facts and sensory details. Where a sensing type might describe a situation in terms of what literally happened and what they directly observed, an intuitive type tends to be simultaneously processing what is happening beneath the surface, what it might mean, what it connects to, and where it might lead. This happens largely automatically, and it is why INFJs are often described as having insight that seems to come from nowhere. It does not come from nowhere. It comes from a constant, often unconscious process of pattern recognition that runs in the background of how we think. I notice this in how I interact with students during English conversation sessions. Within the first few minutes of a class, I have usually formed a fairly detailed impression of what is actually going on with the person on the other side of the screen. Not just what they say, but how they say it, what they choose to talk about, what they avoid, the energy behind their words. Sometimes I am wrong, but often I am not. And the accuracy of that reading is not something I consciously decided to develop. It developed because my mind is wired to look for patterns in behavior and communication, and I have spent years with thousands of people from different cultural backgrounds giving me continuous data to work with. This intuitive pattern recognition is also why INFJs are often described as being able to read people well. It is not mind reading. It is sophisticated, rapid processing of behavioral and emotional information. And it is exhausting when the people around you are inconsistent or deceptive because your own system is constantly trying to make sense of signals that do not add up. The F in INFJ stands for feeling, which in MBTI terminology does not mean emotional or irrational. It means that when making decisions, the INFJ gives significant weight to values, human impact, and relational considerations rather than prioritizing pure logical analysis above everything else. This does not mean INFJs cannot think logically. We absolutely can. But when faced with a decision, especially one that involves other people, the internal question is not just what is the most efficient or logical outcome, but what is the right thing to do, and how will this affect the people involved? This orientation toward values and human welfare is one of the things that makes INFJs often described as idealistic and sometimes as difficult to work with in environments that treat efficiency as the only relevant measure. My value system is something I take seriously, perhaps more seriously than most people I have encountered in my life. When someone behaves in a way that violates my core values, particularly around honesty and respect for human dignity, it is not something I can easily set aside or rationalize away. I notice it. I file it. And it affects the relationship, even if I do not say so directly in the moment. INFJs tend to absorb a lot before they speak. But when they do speak, when they reach the point of enough is enough, what comes out is usually very clear, very direct, and sometimes startling to people who had mistaken the silence for passive acceptance. The J in INFJ stands for judging, which in MBTI context does not mean judgmental. It means that INFJs prefer structure, closure, and organization in how they approach the external world. We like to plan. We like to understand what is happening. We find ambiguity and open-endedness more uncomfortable than perceiving types do. We tend to have a clear internal sense of how things should be ordered, and when external reality does not match that internal structure, it creates friction. This shows up in how I feel when my schedule is disrupted unexpectedly, when plans change without warning, or when I am in an environment where nothing is predictable. My response to chaos is not panic exactly, but a kind of internal tension that does not release until I have found a way to impose some structure on the situation or accepted that I cannot and adjusted accordingly. The adjustment takes energy. The unpredictability costs something. Now let me talk about some of the things people most commonly ask or wonder about INFJs. One of the most frequent questions is about the INFJ door slam. This refers to the way an INFJ can completely cut off contact with someone who has repeatedly violated their trust or treated them in ways that fundamentally conflict with their values. It seems sudden from the outside. It is not sudden from the inside. The INFJ has usually been absorbing, processing, giving chances, and adjusting their expectations for a long time before the door closes. When it finally does, it closes because continuing the relationship has stopped making sense as anything other than continued harm. I know this pattern well from my own life. The relationships I have walked away from were not impulsive exits. They were the result of long, quiet accumulations of evidence that this person, or this situation, was not going to change in the ways I had hoped. The decision, when it finally comes, feels like the only logical conclusion to a long series of observations. To the other person, it can feel like abandonment without warning. But from the INFJ's perspective, the warnings were there, communicated in every way except perhaps the most direct one, for a long time. Another common question is about the INFJ paradox, which refers to the way this type seems to contain contradictions. They are introverted but deeply people-oriented. They are idealistic but often unexpectedly blunt. They appear calm but are processing enormous amounts of emotional information beneath the surface. They care deeply about others but can become suddenly and completely unreachable when their boundaries are crossed. These are not contradictions, exactly. They are the natural result of a personality type that runs most of its most important processing internally, rarely shows the full picture of what is happening inside, and tends to present only what is needed in any given external situation. What looks like contradiction from the outside is usually coherence that has not been fully explained, because INFJs often feel that explaining themselves fully is more trouble than it is worth in most social contexts. INFJs also frequently struggle with what might be called the counselor burden. This is the tendency to attract people who want to share their problems, their pain, their complicated situations. INFJs are often perceived as safe to open up to, and they usually are. They listen well. They do not judge quickly. They try to understand the full picture before forming an opinion. They genuinely care about the well-being of others. But the reverse, finding people who can listen to them with the same depth and patience, is harder. Many INFJs move through life having given enormous amounts of emotional support to others while receiving very little in the specific form they needed. They do not need someone to fix their problems. They need someone who can sit with the complexity of what they carry without becoming overwhelmed or reductive. Those people are rare. And the loneliness of not finding them is something many INFJs feel quietly and consistently. I have experienced this throughout my life. I am good at listening. I am good at creating space for other people to say the things they need to say. But the people who could do that for me, truly, without judgment, without rushing to a conclusion, without getting uncomfortable with depth, have been few. This is one of the reasons I started this channel. It is not that I need an audience. It is that I need an outlet, a place to say the things that have no other place to go. INFJs are often described as having a strong sense of purpose. This is accurate in my experience. There is a persistent internal orientation toward meaning, a feeling that what I do should matter in some way beyond the immediate transaction. This can be a strength. It pushes me toward work that feels genuine rather than just profitable. But it can also be a source of frustration, because real life does not always align with the kind of meaningful work an INFJ is drawn to, especially when financial necessity requires prioritizing survival over purpose. Learning to hold both, the need for meaning and the practical requirements of daily survival, is something I have been working on for years. The channel is part of that. It does not earn money yet, but it serves a purpose. It is where I process things out loud, learn things I then share, and build something that might eventually become financially meaningful while remaining personally significant. That balance between purpose and practicality is a tension many INFJs live with constantly. One more thing I want to address, which is the question of how INFJs handle conflict. The honest answer is, not naturally or easily, but not by avoiding it indefinitely either. INFJs dislike unnecessary conflict. They prefer to address tension through conversation and understanding rather than confrontation. They will often try to see the other person's perspective, sometimes too generously, before asserting their own. But when an INFJ's core values are at stake, or when someone repeatedly crosses a line that the INFJ has communicated, the response is not more accommodation. It is a firm, clear, and sometimes final response that surprises people who expected continued patience. I have been described by some people as too sensitive. I have been described by others as unexpectedly direct. Both observations are accurate, and they describe the same person at different stages of processing the same situation. When I am still absorbing something, I may seem soft. When I have finished processing and made a decision, I am anything but. Understanding this about myself has taken most of my adult life. Understanding that my sensitivity is not a weakness but a form of perception, that my directness is not cruelty but clarity, that my need for solitude is not antisocial but necessary, that my capacity for depth is a feature of how I am built and not a burden I should apologize for. All of that has been slow work done mostly alone. I am an INFJ in a world that is mostly built for extroverts, for people who process out loud, who are energized by large social groups, who prefer quick decisions over careful deliberation, who are more comfortable with surface-level interaction than with the kind of depth that INFJs seek and feel most alive in. That is sometimes lonely. It is sometimes frustrating. But it is also, when I can access it clearly, something that feels genuinely valuable. The depth of understanding I can reach. The quality of connection I can offer when I find the right person or the right context. the consistency of my values even when they cost me something, the way I can look at a situation from multiple angles simultaneously and find patterns others miss. These things are not nothing. They are, in fact, a specific and sometimes useful way of being in the world. If you are an INFJ watching this, I hope something here felt like recognition. If you know an INFJ and have been puzzled by them, I hope something here felt like clarity. And if you're just curious about personality types and want to understand the full picture of how different people are wired, I hope this was a useful starting point. In the next videos in this series, I will go through the other 15 MBTI types with the same level of depth and honesty. Because I think understanding how different minds work is one of the most practically useful things a person can do, both for their own self-awareness and for their ability to navigate a world full of people who are genuinely, fundamentally different from them. Thanks for watching. If this conversation resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I am currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my unfiltered diary of solo living in the Philippines, from the long days in the ESL classroom to my journey as a beginner learning Japanese and Korean. Your support helps me build my retirement fund and keeps this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I will see you in the next one.